Hi, AP Seminar students. It is Mrs. Malloy, and I am here today to talk to you about the Proficiency Understand and Analyze Perspectives. More specifically, today we are going to focus on the idea that putting perspectives in conversation allows us to see the complexity of an issue. Because we are now at the point where we are really unpacking perspectives and starting to put them in conversation, it is important to give you some background that hopefully you have watched the Understand and Analyze Perspective videos 1 through 4. If you haven't, you absolutely can continue, but just know some of the references will be in direct relation to the things that you would have seen in those other videos. I highly recommend that you watch them before you continue, but if not, it's okay. You can fill in the gaps, hopefully, by going back and watching those videos as we move forward. So for today, just a reminder, as we've talked about previously, we're going to focus on putting perspectives in conversation. And as you see from the people on the screen, each one of these people in their thought bubbles represent an individual source with an individual perspective. Those sources exist in isolation. It is our job to identify what the perspectives are within those sources and then to be able to put those sources in conversation. So as you see on the screen, we see the arguments being made within each of the sources as they're all about voting age. We have decided which perspectives get to sit at the dinner table and be a part of the conversation, and now we need to move them into actually writing up the conversation or starting to craft it and develop it and see what the complexity of the issue is. So let's start by practicing. So what I would like you to do is read the article, Young People Have a Stake in Our Future, Let Them Vote by Kelsey Piper, and Lowering the Voting Age, Let's Raise It Instead by Jeff Jacoby. If you've joined us for previous videos, then you've read these articles already, but I would still like you to go back and refresh your memory and read through them again to make sure that you are clear on the perspectives. If you haven't read them at all, make sure you give them a good read because you will need a clear understanding of the perspectives in these sources to move forward with this video. Pause the video, take some time to read, and when you're done, please come back. So now that you've reread or read those articles for the first time, what I'd like you to do is pull up the Academic Conversations template on the top of the screen from the book They Say, I Say. As you open up the document, you will notice that it is exactly what it's entitled. It is Academic Conversation Templates or sentence starters that will help you frame conversations and start to develop the conversations among perspectives. We're going to draw our attention to page 1, where they talk about introducing an ongoing debate. More specifically, I'm going to use the APA section about how to introduce a debate, but if you'd like to write the MLA one, that's totally fine. It's up to you. But what you'll notice here is this is going to help us set up the conversation. In discussion of X, which would be what our topic is, one controversial issue has been. And so if we look at the next slide, what we'll see is we have that template just written out so we can start to fill in the blanks. We're going to use what we know about Jacoby and Piper to do that. And so magically, look, there's the conversation. So as you see in orange, those are all the things that I've added. So in discussion of voting age, because that's what we were talking about, that's what we had our dinner party on and brought to the conversation. One controversial issue has been voting age. On the one hand, some argue that it is best as it currently is, while on the other hand, some contend that the voting age should be lowered, while other researchers argue that it should be raised. So now I've set up the issue. Some researchers, and now it's my decision if I want to start with Piper or Jacoby, but as you can see from the screen, I decided to do Jacoby first. Such as Jeff Jacoby, have maintained that when the 26th Amendment lowered the voting age nationwide from 21 to 18, largely on the strength of the claim that if 18-year-olds were old enough to be drafted, many young men were being called up and sent to Vietnam, they were old enough to be given the vote. The quality of American politics and governance wasn't improved by letting 18-year-olds vote. Now, I decided to use an exact quote to start showing you the conversation. You are welcome as you put together the ongoing debate to paraphrase these in your own words or to use some excerpts of a quote, but just to make it clear that I was really living within the sources as I put them together, I tried to stay more towards quotes in my examples. So where do we go from here? Well, we know that sources can agree, they can disagree. Sometimes they can agree and disagree at the same time. They can also complicate and confirm and contradict and extend or enrich each other. So I know where I left off and I had Jacoby, but how do I fit Piper into the conversation? Well, I have to think about what relationship Piper's ideas have to Jacoby's because that helps me understand their perspective. Now, I know that she didn't like the voting age, and he didn't like the voting age either, so we know they agree. But they disagree on which way the voting age should go, whether it should be higher or lower. So that led me to think about, okay, if they agree and disagree, based on what I see, where do I then enter the conversation? Well, if I take this same paragraph that we just wrote and I really apply those same ideas, then when I go into my academic templates, I notice that there is a section completely on agreeing and disagreeing at the same time. So I'm going to take that first sentence and I'm going to try to continue the conversation using that. Now, one of the things that you probably see in the templates is that the word I is used repeatedly in a variety of different perspectives. But for AP Seminar, it's really not thinking of this as they say, I say, because when I or we enter the conversation, it's going to look a little bit different, and we're not going to use the word I when we do it, and I'll explain to you what that looks like in an upcoming slide. But we're going to think of it as they say, they say. So one author and the other author. So if we look at that first one, really if we were trying to make this work for AP Seminar and using them to establish conversations, although Piper agrees with, and then I would insert Jacoby up to a point, Piper cannot accept his overall conclusion, much like I would do with the second one. Although Piper disagrees with much that Jacoby says, right? She fully endorses. So I can use these to frame and set up the conversation between them, but I'm not using the I because the I or us fit into the conversation a little bit differently. So what I'd like you to do is take that first sentence stem. Although Piper agrees with Jacoby up into a point, she cannot accept his overall conclusion that. And I want you to continue the paragraph that we've started to write, which you can see on the side of the screen, by adding that sentence and then starting to establish what Piper is actually arguing or her perspective. After you have written that out, unpause the video and come back and I'll show you what I wrote. All right, so as you can see from my example, I highlighted Piper where I replaced her name with the I, so you can see that I did manipulate the template just a little to show the they say instead of they say, I say. But what you'll notice in that first sentence is, although Piper agrees with Jacoby up into a point, and I clarified what his point is, that voting age should not be kept at 18, Piper disagrees with Jacoby on how the voting age should be changed. And then I continued to establish what she was saying. In response to Jacoby, Piper admits that decreases in the voting age may have been controversial at the time, but they're uncontroversial in hindsight. She continues arguing that when people become able to vote, politicians work harder to cater to them, and politicians working harder to cater to young people would be a good thing. And that's really where I asked you to go. But now it becomes, well, how do I further my conversation? Well, what would Jacoby say in response? And so I can look through the templates based on my understanding, and I know that he would disagree. And so I'm going to say that Jacoby disagrees. And then I'm very clear about how he disagrees, claiming that young people are too uninformed. And then I've added this transition rather to clarify what he would like to happen. He wants the age to be raised. So what you'll notice in here, not only am I very clear about how their perspectives connect, but I'm really digging into the details of those perspectives and no longer looking at them from a bigger perspective. Just like we talked about in previous videos too, you see that transitions are being used here as bridge words to help show the connection between ideas. So that rather is really helping to clarify, instead of this is what he wants, right? Rather, this is what he would like to see. And there are lots of transitions that you'll see on those academic templates and that are found here that are going to help establish the conversation and help us see the relationship between the ideas and the argument, okay? So the question you might be asking is, well, where do I fit into this conversation? You said I'd fit in somewhere, but I'm not really sure. Well, we fit in without the I, but commentary is the place where you fit in. Commentary is where you can enter a conversation, where you can complicate, confirm, contradict, extend, enrich the conversation. Commentary, like transitions, are like bridges. They are going to unite sources and move us from those individual sources that are existing in isolation to really developing in conversation where they're interacting with each other. It also helps us understand the perspective of the larger issue. So if I look through the academic templates, one of the sections that stands out to me that's a great place for us to have commentary is in why your claim matters. The sources may not explicitly say why their claims matter, but that's a place where I can say voting age matters or voting age is important because, right? And that's where I'm entering the conversation, but I'm doing it by extending the conversation, by clarifying the value, by not necessarily needing a quote to support it, but needing to extend the ideas that are already there. Or maybe it seems like something isn't really that important, but it is, right? And so we see in the second one, although voting age might seem trivial, it is in fact crucial in terms of today's concerns over, right? And so you can think about what that actually means, or what's at stake here, what's important. And I, again, can add commentary. I can also talk about the consequences. These findings have consequences that are this, right? We can also talk about why it matters on a larger scale or what this is applicable to. So these are just ways that you can start to enter the conversation. There are plenty more. But as you see within these, we don't have the word I anywhere in here because it's not about what I think. It's about how I am extending conversations, how I'm complicating them, how I'm using my commentary to do that. So if we go back to the example that we wrote or that I wrote, and we focus on the highlighted parts, those are places in my head whenever I'm reading a source and trying to unpack those conversations. I think about the places where I would have disagreement or where I would have questions or where I would ask, but so what, right? And so for Jacoby, he says young people are too uninformed. Well, my struggle, which Piper actually picks up on, is just because you're 25, you all of a sudden are going to be informed. I have older relatives that don't know a lot, and they're less informed than some of the students I have in class. So clearly there's an issue. What evidence does he have to support this? How does he know this? Where is this coming from? And even with her, she says, well, it doesn't matter because voters are never going to be informed. Well, it seems like both of them are failing to acknowledge the fact that what's really at stake here, what really matters, maybe isn't the voting age, but maybe it's actually how we get voters to be more informed. What could we do there? And so those are places where I can enter the conversation, where I can add commentary without feeling like I have entered the conversation with the word I, but my voice is still present and I'm working to extend those perspectives and conversations. So what's our takeaway from today? Well, our takeaway is that, like we started, perspectives exist in isolation. Each one of these people is a source that has its own perspective and its own argument. And it is our job to decide who gets to be at the dinner table, and then from the dinner table, who gets to be a part of the conversation that we start to unpack. And it's not a matter of just overviewing it and, oh, some people think voting age works and some people don't, and some people want to raise and some people want to lower. We want to really get into the weeds here and focus on the specific details and see how the perspectives come together, how they talk to each other. Because putting perspectives in conversation is the only way that we can truly see the complexity of an issue. Thank you for watching. I hope you find some joy in your day, and we will see you next time.